Okay, so it's Alex Love with Arizona United News. I have Tracy
Basterrechea.
Basterrechea.
Yes.
Here from the Meridian Police Department. So do you want to tell the viewers a little bit about yourself as to...
Sure. I'm a native of Idaho. I grew up in a small farming, ranching community in southern Idaho. Probably a town of maybe 1,500, 2,000 people. Gooding, Idaho. My father was first generation, or an immigrant here. He came here from the Basque region of Spain to herd sheep in the 1950s, 1951 to be exact. His father had been here prior to that as on a sheep herding contract, and then went back, was married, had built a family, and of course the Spanish Civil War had broken out, and Franco, the fascist dictator, came into power, and so Basques were very oppressed there at that time, weren't allowed to speak our native tongue, Euskera, and so my grandfather came back to the United States on a sheep herding contract and then got his citizenship so he could bring his sons here, and they all came as well. Once they all immigrated here, my grandfather went back to the Basque Country to live with my grandmother and their daughter, where he passed away. And all of my dad's brothers gained their citizenship here, and I've been with the Meridian Police Department for 23 years.
So you've been with one
September, I have. Worked a lot of different assignments, worked with the DEA task force, got to travel around the West. Oakland, Phoenix, Seattle, Portland area, because I also spoke Spanish, which helped in that work. And then I've worked my way up through the ranks in our agency, worked every division in our department, so I've seen a lot of big change in Meridian for sure. It's a population that has exploded.
So with the population growth of this area, are you kind of preparing yourself in your department for it?
We're trying. It's certainly difficult. There is a kind of a curve that we're always behind as far as hiring officers and having enough officers, because as probably most people know, cities don't necessarily hire for the growth. They kind of hire after the growth comes, and so we're always behind that population growth.
Okay, so as far as like crime goes, like is there any new types of crime that are starting to happen around here?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say they're new. Maybe a little more prevalent than we've been used to in the past. Certainly we've seen more violent crimes than we saw early on in my career. And so, and that comes with growth. And we're dealing with the opioid epidemic just like the rest of the country's dealing with as well. We deal with a lot of property crimes, and a lot to deal with methamphetamine is still very prevalent in the area. So the big thing that I saw about you as opposed to I saw your articles on a couple news stations about your martial arts training, and you're an instructor, correct? I am, yes. I have an associate instructor in Jeet Kune Do in Filipino Cali, and I hold a black belt in Kodokan Judo and a first degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Under Craig Kukuk was my first instructor, and he was the first American to get a black belt in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu under the Gracies when they came here.
What got you interested in the martial arts? When did you start?
Well, I was always interested in them. I did a little bit of Kung Fu when I was younger, did some boxing, was really big into wrestling, and so that kind of transferred over into the grappling arts. And of course, going into law enforcement, it just made sense that you should continue that training and figure out what really was effective and what wasn't effective.
So I understand that you want to train officers for use of force or even to disarm?
Yeah, our biggest, one of my bigger pushes, and I'm involved with a called Police Judo group, kind of started in Canada, in Vancouver, Canada, to be exact. They have a very strong police judo program there, as well as a jiu-jitsu group called Invictus. And Invictus's push is to make Brazilian jiu-jitsu or jiu-jitsu mandatory training for all police officers to a certain level. And kind of the same concept with the judo, as well as combining the two, is what I think is certainly the most effective for law enforcement. I just feel like, our job really in most situations is to control a subject. Not to beat a subject into submission, it's to control a subject. And so those are really two arts that really combine the two, where you can learn to properly, if you need to take somebody to the ground, take them to the ground without injuring them, or less likelihood to injure them from the judo aspect. And certainly once they're on the ground, the more controlling aspect from the jiu-jitsu perspective. And so I think those are two really big pushes that you're going to start seeing more and more of in the United States as jiu-jitsu grows. Certainly we don't look at it from the MMA perspective. We really want to look at it from the controlling perspective. We still teach, of course, firearms, baton. We teach our officers to strike when necessary, because really all those things come into play at some point. You have to be prepared for all of those things. But I think if you can control somebody early on in a conflict, you're going to be much more successful. And certainly we've seen improper uses of force, unnecessary uses of force throughout the country, throughout the world, that could have possibly been de-escalated or controlled much sooner had people been trained better.
So I noticed with Phoenix PD, because obviously I deal with them a lot, they've even come to admit that they don't have enough training in mental health. Do you think
Absolutely. It is, and we do train in that as well. We do crisis intervention training for our officers every year as a refresher. The majority of our officers have been through a crisis intervention training program that's 40 hours. And it's one of the things that we saw coming a long time ago. When we started seeing funding for mental health institutions and other things being cut, we knew we were going to be the front lines dealing with those people that are dealing with those mental health crises. And, policing is a very interesting job in that everybody wants you to be an expert in every single thing that you deal with. And if we were to do that, your police departments would triple or quadruple, because you would have to have people in training every single week. We're making decisions that lawyers get to criticize, quite honestly, sitting in a chair in an office and spend all the time in the world to look at an unfolding use of force or situation. Same thing with dealing with mental crisis issues. Doctors can look at things and psychologists and people look and go, oh, well, they're suffering from this type of mental issue or that type of mental issue. Well, we're in the moment, and we don't have that medical training. We don't have 8 years of medical training. We don't have, 20 years of martial arts training and so a lot of officers kind of compartmentalize and they focus on certain areas, and really our goal is we want well-rounded officers that can do everything. Yeah. And I think that's where some agencies, and sometimes I think it's unavoidable with size, it's a lot easier to focus on the few than focus on everybody, and I think that's a place where we struggle a little bit in law enforcement throughout the country.
Do you think maybe like the legislative branch might kind of put as far as, because you have to memorize several different laws, right?
Yeah, so, you have to know all kinds of laws.
So
certainly.
Do you think that maybe like with more laws it creates? Because obviously you have discretion as far as enforcing. As far as legislation goes, do you think that has anything to do with like?
It does. It can certainly kind of muck things up for officers, and sometimes you have conflicting laws. and they don't go back and they don't fix them. One of the laws that we've looked at and the legislature here has yet to address is the disorderly conduct law or disturbing the peace law of swearing in front of children and kids, right? The Supreme Court ruled years and years ago that in and of itself isn't disturbing the peace. There have to be other elements to that. Yet it's still on the books. And you will have officers every once in a while, they're like, no, I wrote him a ticket for this, or I'm routing this for charges and this is why. And even though we tell them, it's not, they forget.
Yeah.
And they look at their code book and they go, no, it says right here. Yeah. It's one of those things that has to be cleaned up. And so I think that, I always tell people, know the really the high liability laws. You got to know those inside now. The others, you should be able to slow down. Go to your code book. You're not going to remember the entire code book. Nobody is. Yeah. And you have time on your side. So go to the code book and research it and see what you need to.
With the disorderly conduct, there might be some concerns to citizens, and it might bring emotions up. So is there any training like how to handle your emotions and how to deal with other people? Because I know everyone has their own preferences.
Yeah. We do. We teach. Teach. They call them de-escalation techniques. A lot of people do. We really kind of call it non-escalation. And it can be from the very start of your traffic stop. Instead of starting your traffic stop with, do you know why I stopped you today? The gotcha question, are they going to admit to it? Tell them up front. I'm Officer Basterrechea with the Meridian Police Department. The reason I stopped you today was you were doing X, Y, and Z. Right there, you've taken away the opportunity for, no, I don't know, or yes, I do know, and now I've got the gotcha moment. I know if I have a violation, explain to them what the violation is. If they want to argue about the violation, you can explain to them, this isn't the time or place to argue this violation. Here's the options that we have. Mm-hmm. Explain the options to them. No need to get in an argument back and forth. And I know sometimes that can be an impossibility with some people because they're looking for the argument. And we can't sit on the roadside and just banter back and forth. There's a time and place for those opportunities. But I think most of the time when you explain to them right up front, this is why I stopped you. They go, yeah, they know. They know why you stopped them. People usually know why they've been stopped. And my experience, most people are very honest. And when you say, this is why I stopped you, they're like, yeah, it is.
So I noticed with Washington State Patrol that they've been doing a lot more warnings when they do traffic stops. Do you think maybe obviously someone who's continually doing the same thing, you gotta put your foot down.
Yeah.
But are your officers more likely to give warnings? And
it depends. I think it depends really on the violation. Is it a violation that is truly a public safety violation? Are you excessively speeding? Are you texting while you're driving? Those are things that take lives. But do our officers give a lot of warnings? Our officers give a lot of warnings. Absolutely, they do. And we don't really go out and track their statistics and go, you give too many warnings, not enough tickets. If we have a guy that never gives a ticket, are we going to talk to him? Yeah, because what are you doing out there?
Yeah.
But we really tell them our job is to change that behavior. And many times the warning and a discussion on the roadside, not a butt chewing, a discussion on the roadside explaining to them why what they're doing is dangerous and why they need to change that behavior is going to go as far or further than a citation, no doubt about it. Our job is really, we want to prevent crime, we want to educate our public, and then we're going to enforce the law. So enforcement's really kind of that prong that's over here.
So rather than policing for profit, do you understand what
I do, and there are agencies that have done that, and literally, I think it's one of the reasons. While I believe that what occurred in Ferguson was a tipping point. What the officer did, he was fighting for his life. I don't challenge that one bit. But that was really a tipping point for policing for profit. It really was. It was a community. I mean, you had the mayor telling chiefs to, we need to make up this money. You need to do this. We absolutely don't do that. I've never even had our mayor ask us how much is you guys got in on citations, what haven't you got in? I couldn't tell you that. I don't look at that.
And a lot of that comes with agencies that do police for profit that come from like city council and
yeah, they're set up. Their system's set up differently, certainly than our system is set up in Idaho, I believe.
so it's more of a community face.
Well, and this sounds kind of cheesy because you've probably heard it 1,000 times, but you know, the community are your police and the police are your community, and that should be what it is. You know, we have police officers who are coaches in the community. I have coached various sports in the community. I teach judo to kids and JiuJitsu to kids in the community. We are the community. You know, I'm your neighbor.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to see each other every day. And that's the way it should be. And I've had that debate with some people from some foreign countries. One in particular that was from an African country who was very clear that they move their police officer into communities where they don't know anybody. And they think that's going to avoid corruption. That's not going to avoid corruption. You know, good safeguards and ethical policing and hiring ethical people is going to avoid corruption. And I always tell people when they come in, we can take a good person and we can turn them into a good cop. We can teach you the skills. I can't take a bad person and turn you into a good cop. You're a bad person. Mm-hmm. If you're unethical, you're going to be unethical. And we can't change that. That's been long implanted through your family upbringing and the structure that you've had throughout your life long before you ever come to us.
So there's some agencies that will
incentivize people to live inside that community.
Yeah. Do you think that's a good idea?
I think there's a bigger issue there. And I think that issue lies with, quite honestly, the figures that control a city and run a city, not the police department. Because you haven't done the things to... When I look at that, like for instance, we don't make our officers live within our city. We have some that do, we have some that don't. We have some that live in the other county. They have to be within the area. And we don't have any issues. I think that when you have to incentivize a police officer to live inside of your city to police, you've got a bigger problem. It's not going to make him a better police officer.
Okay.
It's not. I think that you're incentivizing them because you've lost a piece inside of your community and you think that's what's going to fix it.
Okay.
Do you understand where I'm going with that? Is, listen, if you build those community relations with your officers every day out there on the streets, Joe Blow doesn't care that Tracy lives a mile outside the city limits. They could care less. They care how I police them and how I interact with them on a daily basis when I'm dealing with them.
Okay.
Now, I think when you understand your community better, it absolutely helps. But when your community should really be a reflection of everybody that's around you. Meridian's not that much different than Boise. Meridian's not that much different than Cuna. The people aren't, anyway. So it really shouldn't matter whether I have an officer that lives in Cuna that's working in Meridian or not. I think that is something that your police department and your city has lost control of, quite honestly, over an entire period of time. It's a discussion that we have with our officers day one when they come to work for us. I talk to them about our mission, vision, and culture of the Meridian Police Department. I'm very clear that, every day we're putting money in that community bank. And you know what? We may have to take a withdrawal out of that because of maybe something controversial that happens or a use of force that happens. And guess what? That better not bankrupt you or you haven't done your job. I mean, are we going to make mistakes? Absolutely, we're going to make mistakes. There's going to be human error in every single thing we do. I mean, we're dealing with human beings. But when you police your community correctly, they understand that. And they're going to be much more forgiving to you. But when you lose that, you've lost it.
Okay.
And that's the thing we explain to our officers. When we lose it, it's going to take 20 years, 30 years to get back, if you ever get that back.
And obviously we see it with like Yelp and Google reviews.
Oh, sure.
That one bad
Absolutely. Can kill you, right? You can have 50 great reviews and the one bad review someone sees, and they're more reticent to have it. Bad news always travels quicker. I mean, you think about it. You get a group of people together, they're more likely to complain about all the problems or all the great things that are going on around them. Complain about the problems. I interviewed a potential candidate this morning, the chief and he basically said that. He said, when I came to your police department, everything was going so well, and the interaction, the way everybody, he goes, but I got to be honest, he goes, I was looking for the bad thing. What was I going to find that bad thing that's out there? And that's human nature.
Yeah. So getting back to martial arts,
yes.
As far as training, are you working with any larger organization to probably bring it to other police departments?
So I can tell you that Invictus is kind of the movement. They have a page out there. They just did a big seminar in Houston, Texas. They're going to do a seminar in September in Las Vegas for police officers. And so the idea is kind of to start to get that movement going that way. I do know that talking to, I went to the police judo clinic in Canada, and there were more officers from the United States than I expected to be there. And so I've been in contact with them, and we all have some ties to USA Judo. And so we're working, each of us through our angles and our ties to USA Judo, to see if we can get some support from USA Judo as well, to start putting together a program and going out and helping and building that program up. So the movement's starting small, grassroots, like I think all great movements do, and hopefully we'll start to get that national push that we need. I was approached by an officer from the Denver area who was at the International Police Judo Clinic in Vancouver, and his mom, he had actually grown up in McCall, his mom had seen the TV spots on the news that you had kind of referenced, and so she sent them to him, and so we ended up connecting through that way, and one of the people that I actually teach with knew him from the Olympic Training Center. So he had reached out to my other coach and asked him what he thought about how effective judo would be for policing, and he said, well, you need to talk to my partner, he's a police officer too. And so we're all making those little ties. I was recently down in LA, met with an LAPD officer that teaches judo to kids down there. He was also in Vancouver with me, and so we've kept those connections as well. There's some officers in Washington that are involved with that movement as well. Raider Tactical does a lot with martial arts, and they're out of Washington as well. Don Gula, doing a lot of different people coming together to try to get this really moving throughout the United States. So.
Awesome. So bringing it back to my local area, Phoenix, so last year we had 46 officer-involved shootings. 22 of those, the person that was shot died. So obviously it's a city of 1.7 million, large city. There's a lot of dynamics, but at the end of the day, do you think some of those lives could have, or some of those lives could have been saved if the officers knew different types of martial arts?
Well, I'd have to look at the dynamics of each use of force, but I think absolutely. I think there's a lot of things that martial arts in general teach people when they stick with it and they go to that higher level. And one of those is that discipline and that ability to defuse situations.
Because there's like a giant philosophy part behind it, where you kind of have to.
The avoidance of the conflict, number one.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing that we teach, right? Try to avoid it first off. And how do you avoid that? Well, we've said this for years to officers as well. Your number one tool is your mind and your mouth. Your mouth a lot of times can get you in more trouble than it doesn't. And so, learning to have those conversations, learning to know that a lot of times people aren't upset with you as a person. Don't take that personally. Mm-hmm. They're upset as you as an authority figure. They're upset as you because they've had a bad experience with a police officer in the past.
Or just upset at the situation.
At the situation, absolutely. And you can't take that personally. And you know what? Is it hard sometimes? Sure. Have somebody tell you they're going to rape your wife and your kids sometime. Let me know how easy that is to not let that start to affect you over time, or what they're going to do to your family, or how horrible of a person you are. And here you are. I'm just here to try to diffuse the situation and help out a lot of times. And so I think that those things, that type of discipline that martial arts brings to it, that in and of itself helps a person. It's one of the things that you teach. We teach our kids in the judo program. I always tell them, when you're done with a match, win or lose, you go thank that person. Because Jigoro Kano's philosophy was you train half for yourself and half for your opponent. Because without that person to fight with in a judo tournament, you wouldn't have a judo tournament.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be doing judo. You'd be doing Tai Chi, I guess. I don't know. You'd be doing something by yourself. They're giving you that opportunity. So you have to respect that. And I think when you build that into a child and somebody who's coming up through the program, that when they reach those higher levels, they really understand it, not just there, but they understand it in the whole dynamics of dealing with people. One of the things we ask every single kid in the program, at the end of a practice, one of our senseis, Steve Vieira, who attributes judo to saving his life and getting him out of a rough part of the East Coast and really giving him an opportunity to see the rest of the world. And he asks every one of them, what'd you do nice for your parents today that they didn't ask you to do? Not a chore, not tell me what you did nice this week for somebody. And we always talk about, he tells them, when you see that kid that nobody's sitting next to at lunch, you go sit by them. Those are our expectations as a judo player. Winning tournaments, that's great. But the other kids don't follow you because you're great at winning tournaments. They follow you because of the kind of person that you are.
Yeah.
That's why people follow you. And they remember how you treated them.
And so I'm a First Amendment auditor, as well as being a journalist. So a lot of us, when the confrontation starts, it's usually because of the approach. Do you think approach is like body language?
Absolutely, on everybody's part. On the officer's part, on the person that's doing the First Amendment part. Are you just trying to pick at somebody, right? Are you just there to pick at, or do you really want to see how they're going to react? And that can start the whole dynamic. Again, it comes to traffic stops, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? Me walking up to you going, what are you doing?
Yeah.
As opposed to going, hey, I see you're filming. Is there something I can help you with? Does that change the whole dynamic of that interaction? Absolutely it does. Sure it does. It's human nature.
Yeah.
Because when I say, hey, what are you doing? Your response is, I'm exercising my First Amendment right. That's what I'm doing. What are you doing?
So there's some auditors that will just not even talk. They'll be a mute.
Sure.
There's also others with actual disabilities.
Sure, absolutely.
I guess do you train for officers to kind of watch for
sure,
to see if maybe
sure. I've got a autistic nephew. I understand that completely. And you can, in my view, having grown up around, or not grown up, he's grown up around me, but being around somebody with disabilities, you can almost instantly pick it out. You kind of understand that. And so the question answer thing, still, even if you're not going to talk to me, if I say, hey, is there something I can do for you? And you just look at me. I try to get a response from you. If I can't get a response, fine. You want, no problem, keep filming. Do what you need to do. Enjoy your day. If there's anything I can do to help you, please let me know.
Awesome.
Right? Because you don't have to talk to me, certainly. But I think if you have that ability to have a discussion, really that's why you're there anyway. Have the discussion.
Yeah.
You want to learn what we are doing, we want to learn what you're doing, and we're all going to be better for it.
Yeah.
Right? It shouldn't be us versus you versus us. That's not the whole idea.
Yeah.
Right? The whole idea behind our policing system in the United States, and I go back to it, is really we're all members of that same community. And we need to treat each other with respect. Is that always going to happen? Absolutely not, because we're dealing with humans. They're going to make mistakes. Do officers need to be held accountable when they make those mistakes? Absolutely they do. Do they always need to be terminated because of it? No. It's a mistake. It depends on the level of the offense.
So a lot of people, a lot of community members get upset because they see these officers that have done some really bad things, sure. And they're given desk job, light duty. Mm-hmm. So some of us in the community down in Phoenix are looking at like a Joe Arpaio standpoint, because he was having the inmates at Maricopa County Jail work. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of thinking maybe these officers that get in trouble, maybe have them do light construction as well as like other stuff, sure. that needs to be done.
I think, my view is this. If an officer has done something egregious enough that I'm going to have him sit behind a desk and do nothing else, he shouldn't be working for us. I mean, that's my view. That officer, if it's that egregious, they're going to be terminated from our organization. Because obviously they aren't fitting in with the culture of the organization. And they need to either be terminated. If it's egregious enough, we're going to terminate them. If it's one of those things where we would terminate them but they wouldn't be decertified and they resign, great. But when another police agency comes to us, we're going to lay out exactly everything that we were doing. Because what we put in there is they resigned in lieu of being terminated by our agency. And then it's up to that other agency if they want to hire them. If it's something that they would be decertified for, we're going to terminate them and put them in for decertification with the Idaho Post.
And that way they can't...
that way they can't be a police officer.
Okay.
And there are some people, quite frankly, that shouldn't be police officers. But I don't think that if it's that egregious that we should reward them with a paycheck sitting behind a desk. That's me. Now I will also tell you, some places have unions and collective bargaining agreements that make it so difficult that those people get put behind desks.
Yeah.
And fortunately for us, we don't have that issue.
So basically, a lot of us First Amendment auditors educate the public on how to film. There's a safe distance that was given by the Supreme Court, and I'm trying to remember what case it was, but they gave a general idea of 10 to 15 feet. Obviously, as going back to officers approaching the public, it's all based on approach.
Sure.
So do you have any ideas like as to if someone were to go and record a situation with your officer to maybe make it a little bit safer for them and the officer?
Sure, and I guess it depends on, really the thing is just don't interfere with their stop. Don't interfere with their stop. And that's really the best thing. Don't get right up on them when they're trying to do their job. Step back at a safe distance, like you said, 10, 15 feet. That may be a safe distance for some things. It may not be for some things. You know, if they're dealing with a rowdy crowd or something, they may want you to back up just a little bit further for your safety. Or even a traffic accident. There have been several officers this year that have been struck in traffic accidents across the country. Well, we want to keep you safe too. So stand back from that traffic accident. We don't mind that you're going to film us. I mean, film away. At least we shouldn't mind. Why would we? If we're doing our job appropriately, why would we mind that you're filming us? I just don't. I mean, I understand sometimes in the heat of the moment, but sometimes when an officer says, "Sir, you can film, please step back." No, I'm staying right here. Well, no, he's just asking you to step back a little bit. Right? He's asking you to move over here. Or how about this, "Sir, can you move over here so we can see you as well?" Because we don't know you. We don't know who you are. You could be their best friend. Yeah. And now you're standing behind us filming us. Well, I don't know if you're going to jump on my back, if you're going to produce a well. I don't know that. "Sir, can you step around over here just so we can see you as well?" Why not? Is that, unreasonable for a police officer to ask you? I certainly don't think it is. We're really looking at it from a safety standpoint. But film away.
So I'm gonna close this interview.
Yeah.
Is there any thing that you want to say to people in Arizona or even people in your own community?
Well, I think the biggest thing is and you hit on it. It really comes down to approach from both sides, right? It comes down to, how are we approaching one another? And know this, we're all human beings. We all have good days. We all have bad days. We've all been there. We've all snapped at our child or snapped at our spouse or snapped at whoever. Hey, they're humans. They're going to make mistakes. Listen, just realize that going into it and realize we're all in this together. None of us are going away. We're all in this together. And just realize that, are there better ways that we can do policing? Absolutely, there are better ways. Are we open for suggestions on better ways to police? Absolutely we are. And know this, we're trying. We're trying to improve. I think the police judo movement and the Invictus movement make it mandatory are great movements, and it shows that, guess what? Guess where that's coming from? That's coming from the police officers trying to make it better. We understand our job isn't to beat somebody into submission. Our job is to control a subject.
And with LA, as you mentioned, California is the state with the second highest, or the first highest statewide officer-involved shootings. I believe LA is like in the top 5. I know Phoenix is number 1 for last year. I'm talking about. Obviously, Arizona is number 2, and obviously, on both sides, we don't want any funerals for anyone or anyone's family to have to go through their partner, spouse, or domestic partner, or their father, or even mother. Or even like someone's child. We don't want to see
and I can tell you, a police officer doesn't want to see a suspect lose their life. People don't realize the toll that takes on a police officer that is involved in a critical incident where somebody is seriously injured or they lose their life, or the toll that this job takes on them. We're going to lose more police officers to suicide this year than we will to felonious assaults. That's just a fact. Nationwide.
There was one in Flagstaff recently.
We had an officer that took his life that hadn't been here very long, had been a police officer at another agency and came to work for it, hadn't been here very long, took his own life on duty. And I'll tell you, that sends shockwaves through your organization. And we just recently in Idaho passed a post-traumatic stress injury bill where officers can finally get the help that they need for post-traumatic stress. Never had that before in this state. Before, you had to have a physical injury before you could ever get the mental health counseling that you needed through the state workman's comp. And, so that's one of those things where we're working to make progress as well. Where we're having counseling, we're having peer support groups, we're having those things go on. This job takes a toll on people. It does. When you try to breathe life into a baby, and you've got a baby at home, you don't think that takes a toll on that officer?
Yeah.
And you go through a 20 or 30-year career of doing those types of things. Absolutely it does. And so we are working so hard, not just to tell officers it's okay to ask for help, but we're telling our officers it's okay for you to tell them they need to get help. You need to reach out and grab them when you see them struggling and tell them, no, you're going to EAP, you're going to counseling. We're going to get you into a program. And that's one of the things, there's so many dynamics to this job and to this country. And I think that's one thing that people don't understand when they compare, the United States, we're going to compare you to Sweden. Really? Why don't you take a look at the size of the United States and the diversity compared to these other countries and the cultures. Completely different.
Culture is a big thing.
Absolutely, completely different. And so let's focus on how we can make ourselves better. That's what this is about. It's about making us better as police officers, better as a community, better as a country. That's what this is all about. And we can all learn from one another. We can no longer be, we're over here and we're over here. Or if you're over here but you disagree with one thing, you're out. You're not part of our group, right? No, we have to have a diversity of ideas. We have to be able to have some give and take and listen to one another.
And dialogue.
Absolutely. You have to have that back and forth. I mean, it's the main thing. We talked about it earlier, right?
Yeah.
What you say, your mouth, your mind, be open to what you hear. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but it should make you stop and think, should you agree with it? Or is there something you can learn from it? That's one of the things I learned from martial arts. Because forever there were the camps. This is the only way. This is the only way. And then the UFC came along and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu became the only way. And now MMA's changed and the rules have changed. Now everybody's changed. I always tell everybody, you should go to every single training you go to. Even if you think it's not going to be very good, and be able to ask yourself, did I learn something from that? I did. You should be able to pick out one thing that you learned from it, if nothing else.
Anything in life, right?
Absolutely. But that's one of those things I think that I learned from martial arts. I'll learn one thing from every single training I go to, from every single person I talk to. I'm going to learn something from them. Right?
Yeah.
Bruce Lee said, take what's useful and discard the rest, right?
Yep.
But he was open-minded to try everything.
Yep.
And that's just one of those things that I think...
And sometimes you try, you fail. A lot of people give up.
Yeah, absolutely. We travel to the Basque Country quite often to visit family and friends, and I know police officers there. Every chance I get, I'll grab a police officer that I don't know and talk to them. And we'll talk about differences in policing here versus there, and what they face that we don't face, and you learn from those people. You should learn from them. People laugh at me because when we go to the International Chiefs of Police Conference, I'm always finding somebody from a different country to talk to. Because I just love learning, one, about their cultures, and two, what are you guys doing that maybe we can do here, or maybe you can do there? And I just think it's great. I know for years they did some exchange programs where police officers went from the U.S. to different countries, and I thought, what a great idea. What a great idea.
Except one thing that we have that other countries, well, some do, like Mexico has their own constitution, but we have the Constitution and Bill of Rights here.
Absolutely.
So obviously it's probably just organizational and administrative stuff that you're talking about.
No,
as far as what countries.
No, because I think that they learn from us as well, based upon what our Bill of Rights and our Constitution says. Prime example, the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Right? I had a conversation with, and I'm trying to remember where he was from now. I can't remember where he's from. But we were having a conversation about guns in America. And that they didn't have the guns like we have the guns. And I've had officers from England ask me, do your officers walk up on a traffic stop with their gun drawn on every traffic stop? And I said, no, everybody in Idaho has a gun. Most of them have 50 guns. The vast majority of those people are good people. And that's how we should go into those. Do we have to have officer safety? Absolutely. But they couldn't understand why we weren't regulating guns like they regulated guns until I explained to him, do you realize that it is written in our Bill of Rights, our Constitution, that we have an unalienable right to keep and bear arms. And when I explained it to him that way, he went, oh, now I understand why it's such a big deal there. Right? Because they don't talk about that in the media when they talk about guns, and the media that they see there. They don't understand that. And when I was in Spain, I had a discussion with an officer who told me, he literally said, the blacks hate the police. And I said, no, they don't. No, they don't. I go, you're getting a very skewed narrative from the media that you see over here. That absolutely is not the truth. Are there conflicts in certain communities? Absolutely there are. But no, they don't. And we have great relationships with, every race, nationality that you can think of. And you hit it on the head. Talk about cultures or different demographics. We have them all here. Most of these other countries people look at have a very small diversity in their countries. They really do.
Yeah.
And so does that change things? Absolutely it does. So I think these exchange of ideas and discussions with people from other countries are great, because guess what? Sometimes they may stop and go, wow, I'm going to bring this up to, guess what? It may not be a police issue, but I know somebody who's a member of the city council here, or who's a member of the assembly in my country, and I'm going to bring this up to them and see if they learn from us.
And with technology and travel being more prevalent, obviously, it's a good thing to have dialogue where you can kind of prepare people for like roads.
This is what you're going to see when you go there. Hey, take a look at our founding of our republic. There's a statue in the Basque Country of John Adams.
Okay. Really?
Because guess what? John Adams went there to study how the Basques did things, because they basically had a form of representative democracy, republic within the Basque region, and brought that back here. And that's part of how our Constitution was founded. And a lot of people don't know that. There's some great articles about that. Pretty neat.
Yeah.
Guess what? Our founding was learned from my Basque culture.
So is there extensive Bill of Rights and constitutional training for the officers as well?
There's not as much as there should be. We do talk to them about that. Certainly we talk to them about, the certain ones that really apply to them. First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, huge, right? Fifth Amendment, huge. Sixth Amendment, those are the things we really focus on. The 14th, yes, but more so to a detention facility.
Okay.
Much more so is really where that starts to come into play.
Yeah.
But absolutely, we talk about those. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I know both of us have busy lives.
We did.
It's been awesome.
Absolutely, it's great talking to you. Yeah.
So thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, thank you. No, my pleasure. Thank you.